Good morning, and we'll call to order the meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission. Ms. Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Your first item is your first citizens participation period.
It's the first time set aside for public comment. Those wishing to speak on a posted agenda item, now is your opportunity.
Mr.
Please.
Chairman, members of the Commission, Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering for Streets and Highways. I'm requesting that item 43 be pulled from the consent.
Okay.
I guess.
Did you want to speak on 43?
I do.
Yeah.
I do want to speak
you
on 43.
You can speak now. It's on
okay.
consent.
So basically, if I could hand these out, I have a one-page summary of the issues. So I was employed with the RTC as of September 25th, 2017. Prior to that, I was employed with Clark County from 2008 until my employment here. When I was hired, I was instructed that I wasn't eligible for longevity. I wasn't really given a reason to why. I just took it as I didn't get longevity. So when I finally got my management and compensation plan, I reviewed it and I looked at the longevity section. And if you can see in the handout, the current language, which was in place as of September 11th, 2008, basically states the highlighted sections are credible service includes RTC and Clark County service time. And then the other highlighted section, which is important, which basically says if you are hired after June 30th, 2007, you're not eligible for longevity, which would have included me. But then there's the exception. And the exception says for those new hires who have previously received longevity with either RTC or Clark County. So since I was hired with Clark County in 2008, in 2016, I received my first longevity check. In 2017, I received my second longevity check, which was in September of 2017. And then I hired on here in September of 25th of 2017, right after. So I was previously receiving longevity prior to. Now, what HR was telling me is that they were enforcing it the way the proposed language is, which is basically prior to October 1st, 2008, Clark County service is not considered credible. And all I kept asking them was that's fine, but that's not what the document says. And the document, this language was put in September 11th, 2008, and it wasn't changed in April 2009 when it got acted on at the board, and it wasn't changed in September of 2013 when it was acted on the board. So I'm just requesting that the board authorize HR to reinstate my eligibility for longevity.
Very good. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the board on a posted agenda item? Seeing and hearing no one, will close this portion of public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Next is to approve your agenda. Your agenda is in order and ready for your approval.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is your General Manager's report, and we do have a few items to share with you. First, we would like to welcome our new board members. Last month, we introduced Councilman Barone as a new board member, and this month, sorry to one-up you, but now we've got two new board members, so you got some seniority here. First, we'd like to welcome Commissioner Jim Gibson to Clark County to our board. Commissioner Gibson is a native Nevadan and has lived in Henderson nearly all of his life, where he served as mayor for 12 years. He's a practicing attorney in business and commercial law and has extensive experience in tourism, hospitality, entertainment, and business. And he is the first time we've ever had a returning board member. When he was mayor of City of Henderson, he was on our board, so he comes back to us, which means he must have enjoyed something about us, right?
I must have.
I know. And you know what? It's gotten better because Jacob Snow was here at the time, but now you have us. So it's like the sequel, but better. So welcome. We also would like to extend a warm welcome to Mesquite Councilman George Galt. Thank you so much. Councilman Galt is a founding member of the Mesquite Regional Business and Mesquite Works. He has been involved in economic development in Mesquite and volunteers for charitable efforts during his free time. And also, I understand he has extensive experience in administration, public administration, having been a former county manager. So, welcome. Let's see. We have some operator recognitions. First, we'd like to recognize an outstanding operator from TransDev, Monique Hammond. Do we have Monique Hammond with us today? Monique, if you are with us, can you come down? Monique has been an operator for 2 years, where she's been instrumental in helping train new drivers on working with customers with disabilities. Additionally, in 2018, she received the most compliments from our passengers compared to any other operator. So please join me in recognizing her.
Yes, right. I apologize. I try to remember everything, but I got a little nervous. I apologize. I really do. But I thank God, my Savior, first for giving me the strength, the knowledge, and patience to do my calling here with paratransit. I thank my mom for praising me, for raising me to be the woman that I am today. I thank you, TransDev, for my career to represent the company. I thank my clients I have picked up over the past year. Every day I look forward to coming to work to service the public. Meeting different disabled, elderly, and vets throughout the past year, made me realize that just showing patience, kindness, and most importantly, love, like as if they were my own family, proved to me that all the commercial driving jobs I've experienced over the last 25 years, this is the most gratifying one of all. Thank you once again for the acknowledgement of loyalty to service this community in a safe, independent rideshare for those who are not able to transport themselves throughout the valley. And I like to add that my great-grandmother used to tell me a long time ago that people forget what you say to them all day long. They forget what you do for them, but they never forget how you make them feel. And I do thank you so much for this honor and acknowledgement of my hard work and service. Share a little love is free. Thank you.
I do the same.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Monique, thank you for those words of inspiration. We have one more outstanding officer we'd like to recognize. It's an officer from Allied Universal, Sergio Guerrero. Do we have Sergio with us today? Sergio, come on down. Officer Guerrero joined Allied Universal in 2010, where he rose to the level of supervisor and ensures that officers under his supervision are alert, diligent, and accountable. Recently, Officer Guerrero responded to an incident at the Bonneville Transit Center where a customer was experiencing a medical episode and became unresponsive. He quickly sprung into action, contacting emergency personnel to provide the treatment necessary. He's been an asset to Allied Universal and routinely goes above and beyond in his duties to ensure that the day-to-day operations run as smoothly as possible. Thank you, Officer Guerrero, and congratulations.
Well, I'm going to describe, I've been working most of the years at Bonneville Transit Center. And I'm going to describe it in just one word, being a roller coaster. I remember one occasion that I separated two individuals fighting right at the directory in the middle of the Bonneville. And I can handle 2 guys, but I cannot handle 3. So what happened is I controlled the aggressor and separated the other individual, and then all of a sudden, his wife, one of the individual's wife, jumps on top of me, grabbed my neck. I couldn't breathe. But good thing I had my backup, and we were good. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster. But thank you.
Yeah. So yes, well, we are done. You know, and in light of time, I know that some of our board members need to depart at around 9:40, and I know that there's an agenda item presentation that you've been looking forward to hearing. What I'd like to do is hold the rest of General Manager's report well, first I'd like to approve the consent agenda items, and then have you move on to item 44 to hear the resort corridor presentation. Is there anything I need to do to formally do that?
Motion.
Okay.
We are entertaining a motion to approve the consent.
Yep, we're gonna.
I'd just like to put on the record that the speaker on item 42, or whichever he spoke on, is not a posted agenda item on his subject. That would need to be either reposted or brought back. And involving personnel issues, we certainly will defer to staff to address that before it gets back to the board.
Okay.
And that's
So-
the reason why we couldn't entertain or get into any kind of discussion item. So entertain a motion to approve the consent. Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. So next, taking out of order, I'd like to move on to item number 44, which is to receive an update on the resort corridor feasibility study being conducted as part of the overall on-board plan. And with us, we have Senior Director David Swallow to present this item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. So just over a year ago, the RTC embarked on an effort to do a feasibility study, and this is part of the overall on-board effort, looking at the future of transportation here in Southern Nevada. As part of looking at the whole valley and projecting out 20 years, when it came to the resort corridor, we thought that required a little bit more detailed analysis as far as transit options and the feasibility of those options. So we pulled that out and created a separate feasibility study. Ultimately, the results of this study are going to go into that overall plan. So I'd like to just remind you of what this effort involved. Really, at the core is to consider the feasibility of a high-capacity transit connection between the airport and the Strip, to enable better movement along the Strip, and then connect the Strip to downtown Las Vegas. When we initiated this, one of the key elements was to understand the perspectives of our customers. And really, we did this through a coordinated effort, a very extensive in-person survey that was enabled by partnership with the resort properties, with the LVCVA, with the Nevada Resort Association, with the airport. And with that, we had nearly a dozen locations where we were doing these in-person surveys. And we asked folks, how satisfied are you with moving around Las Vegas? And thankfully, you could see 94% of them said they were either satisfied or very satisfied, which is, yes, Mayor.
Please, Mayor Goodman.
It was about 1,700 individuals that we spoke to in person. We also, through the cooperation of the airport, were able to do a survey over their Wi-Fi network for a 2-week period that nearly doubled that sample size. So we had about 3,000 people that responded to this survey. So I think what we see here is a positive indication about what our visitors think when they come to Las Vegas and their ability to move around. I think we also certainly have some folks that we want to focus on too. When we asked people what they looked at when traveling around as far as options, you can see here rideshare is certainly a dominant element of the overall choices people have, and people are allowed to select more than one choice here. But rideshare, as well as personal and rental cars, seem to dominate. Of course, transit is represented both with RTC's bus system as well as the monorail. So the multiple choices, we think, help create that positive response that we heard as far as the ability to move around. This is the study area that we were really focused on. You can see going from downtown along the Strip over to the airport, and then projecting out into the future. I know we are certainly concerned about congestion today, but when we look to the future, we have to acknowledge that we're going to see an increase in visitorship, at least we hope to. And with that, a commensurate increase in the travel to, from, and within the resort corridor. As part of this survey, we also drilled down to look at the three critical links I mentioned earlier. The first is the getting between the airport and the resorts. And you can see that rideshare and taxi really dominate the choice there, obviously, because most of the folks don't have their own car, although 18% of people coming into the airport are renting cars, which, according to the Department of Aviation, that's a trend that's holding pretty steady, which we thought was interesting since the properties are charging for parking now. Going on to the next link, movement along the Strip, really dominated by people having their own cars or taking rideshare. Public bus is certainly an element of that, with nearly 23% of visitors saying they took the bus for some trips. We think the bus is probably a little underrepresented in this response. Part of that is the way we ask the question, in which we ask folks, pick a particular trip you made within the last 24 hours, and then we drill down on that one trip. So we might not have captured everything. I think walking is also grossly underrepresented because people didn't think of a trip between one property and another as a distinct trip. Looking at how people get to and from downtown, again, personal car, rental car, nearly half the trips. Public bus also increased from 7% to 17%. So people staying downtown were much more comfortable and savvy in using the RTC's bus system. We see monorail noted to go downtown. We think that's because of, at the SLS station, when they get off, you can see the Welcome to Downtown Las Vegas sign right there on Las Vegas Boulevard. So we know the monorail doesn't physically go downtown, but we think that was part of that response. Now we ask folks in this chart here, if given other choices, what would you choose? And the way we ask this is we put a series of questions where we said, given these options, and we would put 4 different options up, and we ask them repeatedly. Every survey, we did 6 iterations of asking the same question, each time swapping out the options, changing the travel time estimates, as well as the cost for those options. And with that, we got about 9,000 data points that helped inform what you see here. And I think what was interesting is there was certainly a preference towards having a light rail system available to them, particularly the folks traveling between the airport and the Strip and downtown. Then it gets into the numbers. When we look at how much you're willing to pay for these different options, this chart reflects what people are willing to pay in going between the airport and the resort corridor. And just as an example, if you look at a bus costing $2 for a trip, compare that to light rail, they're willing to pay $8. And so you can see people are a lot more open to having rail and willing to pay for that type of option if given that choice between the airport and the Strip. But when we go to the next chart, it changes dramatically. This is a chart that shows movement along the Strip itself, and people are really not willing to pay much more than they do today for the bus system. And so that's important to know as we look at ridership and potential revenue. If people are not willing to pay more, we can't really anticipate that increase in capital revenue. So looking at we looked at 9 different transit technologies, and we wanted to vet them based on the criteria that you see here. First and foremost are our visitor experience and value. What type of value does it demonstrate to the customer? We have to acknowledge the potential disruption that construction could have. And then when we look at these different options, what kind of speed are they providing? How reliable are they? Are they accessible? Not just in terms of ADA, but are they physically right out in front? As an example, compare the Deuce service on Las Vegas Boulevard to the monorail, which operates in the resort corridor. You know, the Deuce is front and center where everybody is, so it's more accessible than the monorail, arguably. The other part of it is convenience and potential ridership, and then ultimately, what kind of capacity are we adding to move more people with transit? So we look at that roadway capacity in terms of people throughput. So I'll walk you through just briefly on the technologies we considered. First is local bus service, which we currently provide with our Deuce buses. Local bus is stopping a lot more frequently, so it's much more accessible, but because it stops so frequently, it's a lot slower than some of the other options. The next one is the limited stop bus service, which is provided by our Strip and Downtown Express. It moves faster throughout the resort corridor, but it's able to move faster because it doesn't stop as often. And for comparison, I think the Deuce carries nearly double what the SDX does in terms of people. So that accessibility is an important part. The next option we looked at was bus rapid transit, and by its nature would require dedicated transit lanes to be on Las Vegas Boulevard. As we went through and looked at different capacity concerns and the people throughput, I think the idea of dedicated lanes really fell out of favor when you look at how many people are moving. And I'm going to show you a diagram in a few slides that illustrates that. But having the dedicated lanes we think would be problematic at this point. Going on to the next option, modern streetcar. This is one of the technologies that's being considered for the Maryland Parkway project. When we talk about light rail, this is light rail technology. This is the Q-Line streetcar from Detroit, currently in operation. It's one that provides a little bit more people capacity in terms of the vehicle, but it's just a little bit longer than a bus. 60-foot bus on the SDX versus this one's 67 feet long. So they can carry a few more people, but with that, they're not carrying enough more people that it adds much capacity. So we eliminated this alternative from the Strip. European tram, another light rail type technology. This one's a little bit longer. It's about 120 feet long compared to the previous option. It can carry upwards of 175 to almost 200 people. And so this adds a lot more people capacity in terms of per vehicle as compared to our current buses. Elevated people movers, they're popular on the Strip. A number of properties have them. They're good at connecting two endpoints, but not necessarily for line haul transit service where you're stopping frequently along the way and you want to have multiple vehicles going in the same direction at the same time. So we eliminated this as an alternative for further consideration. Monorail is certainly in place, and the Las Vegas Monorail Company has a system that they have in place. They've been operating, I think, since 2004 and are looking at extensions of it. Because the monorail is a private interest, we didn't want to speculate on what they should be doing to expand their system, so we're really looking to see what the Las Vegas Monorail Company decides to carry forward. Light rail, this is the last option we consider, or not the last one, but one of the last options. This one's from Phoenix. Regional type light rail systems, these are they carry a lot more people, but they're also much longer. Typically, they'll have 2 to 3 cars connected together in one train set, which can make them incredibly long, upwards of 270 feet, even over 300 feet long, which, try to imagine getting curb space on Las Vegas Boulevard can be a little challenging. These are also intended to provide higher speed service with further spacing between stations, and also would require dedicated lanes. So with that, we didn't think it was this wasn't the right approach for Las Vegas Boulevard. And finally, aerial gondolas. I don't know how many times I've been out at meetings and stuff, and people mention the gondolas as an option, so we looked at it in detail. For a number of reasons, we didn't think this was appropriate for the Strip. In particular, when we talk about the accessibility criterion, it's just not as accessible as some of the other options that are available. It would require elevated stations much higher than are typical of what we would see on the Strip or in downtown. Also requiring private property to be dedicated to the station location. So with that, we eliminated the gondola from further consideration. So with that, the 3 options that we thought were worth carrying forward into further detailed study were the Deuce, or the regular bus service, the SDX, or the limited stop bus service, and then the European tram, because of the people capacity that it has. So comparing these, we have pros and cons of each. The Deuce and the SDX, it's easy to make changes to those. There's not a lot of capital investment required. We can make changes in our operation. The Deuce is incredibly popular with our visitors. It's part of that Las Vegas experience, we think. But they do have to stop a lot more frequently, and they can't carry as many people as, say, the European tram. With that, though, the buses are flexible in their operations where they can maneuver around congestion, which does happen on the Strip on occasion, and whereas a rail-based system is stuck behind anything that's in front of it. And so that was a consideration. The other thing is the high capital costs that are related to a European tram or other light rail type infrastructure. There is a lot of work that goes into it, potential construction disruption, and also higher costs for operations and maintenance. Looking at, again, the people throughput, this is just a typical diagram of what's out on Las Vegas Boulevard today. You can see for folks that it's a little tough to read the numbers there. On the orange lines on the outer are the pedestrian movements, and you can see they're close to 4,000 people per hour per direction, moving on the sidewalks by walking. So we think walking is certainly an important mode for the resort corridor. When it comes to the vehicle lanes, typically they can carry about 1,200 people per hour per lane. That's assuming around 2 people per car, 2 occupants per car. When you add transit on top of that, which is shown in blue, that increases it over 1,000 people per hour per lane. So think of transit, the buses that are out there today are providing the equivalent of 1 lane of traffic in terms of people capacity. Now we got into looking at 6 different scenarios that I'll quickly walk you through as to how to integrate the Deuce, SDX, and or the European tram into the resort corridor. Alternative 1 is what we have today and just carrying that forward. So you can see the Deuce is reflected in the green line, the SDX in the red line, generally providing service between downtown Las Vegas and movement all the way along the Strip, but with no direct connection to the airport. This is what we have today. And for the numbers at the bottom, in case they're a little tough to read, we're carrying about 30,000 people per day on our bus system in the Strip. Going on to the next alternative, alternative 2 was to look at what if we rerouted the SDX down at Tropicana Avenue over to McCarran Airport instead of going down to the South Strip terminal, thereby providing direct access between the airport, Strip, and downtown with that slight variation, and then having the Deuce kind of replace that service in the south end of the resort corridor. With that, we see a pretty measurable increase in potential ridership, upwards of going up to 40,000 people per day. 10,000 of that would be the connection to the airport potentially. Alternative 3 was if we got rid of the buses altogether and went with the European tram, specifically along Las Vegas Boulevard and into downtown Las Vegas over to the Fremont Street experience. When we looked at this option, you can see that its ridership is comparable to what we're carrying today with the Deuce and the SDX. So really not a lot of increase in ridership, but certainly a lot more cost. When you look at taking the tram over to the airport, though, you can see there's a larger potential ridership, upwards of 50,000 per day if we were assuming 2020 it was already in place, and in the future increasing even further. So that airport connection seems to be a critical element in that. Alternative 5 is if we said, okay, what about mixing the European tram with the bus service? So in this one we have the airport SDX that's shown in alternative 2, and the European tram that's shown in alternative 3 on the same alignment. Again, definitely an increase in potential ridership, but not much more than alternative 2 had by itself. And then alternative 6 was where we said, okay, we'll keep the Deuce in place between downtown and the South Strip, and then have the European tram go between the airport Strip and downtown. This one also seemed to have a pretty measurable increase in ridership, projected at 18,000 trips to and from the airport per day, on top of the 30,000 per day with the Deuce. So getting to the numbers, just comparing them quickly, you can see we have a table here. This is the projected ridership for all the 6 alternatives. Then we go through and look at how much would it cost to actually implement these. And I know I had sticker shock when I first looked at these numbers, $100 million for buses, but keep in mind, this is over, going out to the year 2040. So over 20 years, we're going to be replacing our buses periodically throughout that time period. This also doesn't account for what we receive in grant funds to offset those costs. So this is just the gross capital costs. Also the operating costs, again, for these different options. And then looking at that, the estimated fare box revenue based on the ridership, using the fare structure that we have in place today. So no changes in the fare structure. And you can see pretty large estimated revenues. But what does this all mean? Going to the next slide, we look at the net operating surplus or deficit, and then the capital surplus or deficit. Alternative one, we operate in the surplus, or we have in the past. We hope to in the future. We see a deficit there, but again, that deficit
David,
would be...
real quick, as you do the alternatives, can you specify what they reflected as a reminder?
Oh, yes, thank you. So alternative one is just taking the existing bus service that we have today and projecting it into the future. So the Deuce and the SDX as they are today. Thank you. And so with that, we would offset that capital deficit, again, with federal funds that we typically receive on an annual basis to offset those costs. Alternative two was just all buses, the Deuce operating on the Strip and taking the SDX over to the airport. So this is alternative two. You can see that actually has a much more positive operating surplus and a capital surplus compared to the other alternatives. In fact, it's the only one that's in the black in terms of the capital. Alternative three was if we got rid of the buses altogether and just used the European tram. Again, you can see here a pretty sizable operating deficit, but even more so the capital deficit, upwards of $1 billion, is pretty extensive. Alternative four was where we were taking, again, all European tram, but with a leg over to the airport. This would possibly generate a lot more revenue in terms of having more ridership, more revenue, so that increases the net operating surplus, but also offsets the capital needs. Alternative five, this was the mix of the SDX and the European tram, and you can see, again, capital deficit upwards of $850 million. Alternative six is the Deuce and the European tram, with a capital deficit of $428 million. So looking at those numbers, we thought alternatives 1, 2, and 6 looked the most favorable out of those, just out of initial numbers. Again, partly even though we're showing these capital deficits, we would be pursuing competitive grant programs, things like that, to offset those deficits. And so right now we're going through a detailed financial analysis of those alternatives. So that being said, of those alternatives, there's other improvements that we would look at as part of future investments in the resort corridor, certainly to improve wayfinding and the customer experience. One of the things we heard in the survey is some people just didn't find the access to the bus as intuitive as they thought it could be, so that's something we're working on. Also speeding the boarding process to speed up the service through off-board ticketing, people buying their passes via their phones, things that we're already doing. The other part of it is working with private properties to improve guest awareness, to also enable us to put more robust transit presence in front of properties so that they have, it's intuitive for people to know where they're supposed to go to pick up the bus or other options. Finally, looking at next steps, we have been socializing these recommendations with the key stakeholders throughout the resort corridor, as well as the city, the county, the airport, LVCVA, Nevada Resort Association. We want to take the findings of this effort and incorporate them into the overall onboard plan, and then pursue recommendations. And in the near term, I think when we look at alternative 2, the rerouting of the STX over to the airport, that seems like a viable option we could consider that we're reviewing internally. Longer term, we certainly presented an option with the European tram. We also want to see, though, what's going to happen with the monorail. We've heard of other proposals in other cities about the Boring Company. I know Chicago's looking at that. Do those types of things come to fruition? The other part of it is, 5 years ago, I don't know that we thought about TNCs the same way we do today, transportation network companies. and the impact that they've had as far as mobility. So it's kind of one of those things we can make these near-term investments and then kind of see what's on the horizon for the long term before committing to any further investments. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. Thank you very much for the presentation. And of course, we're looking at just the immediate expansion of transportation. I have a couple questions. I do like different options. To me, the most appealing one is that number 6. But between these different options, 1, 2, and 6, I'm wondering if there's any thought as to which option has better viability when we talk about expansion to the outlying regional partners. For instance, in North Las Vegas, of course, we have the 5th Street expansion that actually has light rail thought built into it. Of these different options, which actually is going to be more amenable to future expansion into North Las Vegas, into, of course, Northwest, East Las Vegas, Henderson? Has there been any thought as to which one would actually be more amenable to that kind of expansion?
We're certainly thinking about that, and that is part of the onboard effort, is to look at the whole valley and how what is being recommended in the resort corridor could affect those future expansions into the rest of the valley. The important thing, I think, for us is to say, from ease of expansion, the buses by far are the easiest to expand. That the minimal capital investment, we can make changes to our route structures to serve different parts of the valley a lot quicker than any of the more intensive investments like European tram. That being said, we are looking at rail-based options as part of the onboard plan and vetting those. And what is proposed here, whether it's bus or European tram, could be expanded to other parts of the valley.
One other question. Although I didn't see it in here, is there any calculation on potential comparisons when we talk about carbon footprint between the different plans?
So we did not compare carbon footprint for these different options. That's certainly a noteworthy comment to take into consideration for this. I think when we look at onboard being the larger mobility plan, we will look at that.
And again, it could be that 10 or 15 years from now, instead of having diesel-based, buses, so to speak, we could actually have a lot more electric or even like hydrogen-powered options that, of course, I have a different calculation altogether. Well, thank you so very much.
Okay.
So our chairman had to depart. Our vice chairman is not here today. He turned to his left and assigned me to conduct the remainder of this meeting. So are there other questions? I know, Mayor, that you have to leave. Do you have any questions you want to leave before you take off?
I just, and thank you, Mr. Junior
Member.
Chairperson,
Yeah.
member. I just, listening to your meetings so frequently and what goes on at the County Commission, knowing the talk and the conversation that's been over the years about having that flyover, it needs total coordination here. This is so critical to moving people throughout our community, and we've got to make sure that we have one voice doing the same thing, agree to it. So I just hope that, and it wouldn't interfere, but would hope that the presentation or whatever you're doing, Ms. Quigley, that that conversation moves forward now. And my apologies to you all for having to leave, but I got to stay to the city tonight, and that takes preference. Sorry.
Yes, we wish you all the luck. Not that you need it.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it is a good idea to ensure that we're not just talking to staff people, but that the elected officials in each of the jurisdictions has an opportunity to receive a report like this. I don't know how you manage that, whether the presenters are someone who is formally an RTC representative, or maybe the staffs in the cities can make the presentation. But there are so many critical pieces of this, because as you think about the congestion in the valley, it's not just along the resort corridor. County is, and to another extent, the city are very concerned about all of that. But the 95 and the 215, some of the things that we're doing, I mean, you can only add so many more lanes, and we really are in a position where we've matured enough as a community that we have to look at mass transit in a more comprehensive way around the valley. So it makes sense to me that all of us really need to understand what the challenges are. It probably will require that all of us play a hand in how we tackle the challenge. And then I think if you think about what's happening at Clark County, we looked at a couple of versions of an elevated roadway. The impacts at Spencer and Tropicana are huge. In some respects, the proposal, well, I wouldn't say it ignores, but it does not accommodate mass transit in and out of the airport, which is something that is a really important thing, particularly in that area, because that's probably the most congested piece of all of it. So this is really very good. And there's probably a whole lot more that we need to evaluate and study. Are there other questions that members of the board have?
First, I wanted to say that I've been fortunate enough to be able to follow this as you've been building upon it the last few years, and we're getting closer and closer to getting the right thing. It is complicated. It seemed to me there was less desire for the rail transportation from what the information you got. Is that true?
Want to address that, David?
Actually, there was more, from the visitor perspective, the rail ranked the highest of all the different options.
From the district perception?
From the visitor's perspective.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And I also wanted to tell you, I have to go with the mayor. She reminded me as she went out, so I hope that doesn't hurt anything in voting.
It only hurts that you're gone.
Yeah, it hurts our feelings.
That's the way to go. Is that all, sweet man? Thank you very much.
Thank you very
So
much.
the rest of our items are just presentation items, so we're okay.
Okay.
Please let 'em go on.
So are there other questions? This is not a public hearing, so at this point,
Correct.
Is it? No, okay.
Well, acting chair, I will talk with you, and if you have some ideas as to how we share the results of this study with our other agencies, county, if you want us to do a county.
Well, I'd say, for instance, I think we need to see this at the county commission meeting.
Okay.
For sure, the impacts of most of in terms of the mileage that we're talking about, are in Clark County.
Correct.
And we're going to have to play an important part in however we tackle this. We're about to do a major infrastructure revision along the entire Las Vegas Strip. So it's a big deal to us now to at least get a sense of what might be coming down the road, maybe even establish some priorities for ourselves as we go forward that could, I don't know that we could do anything that would reflect itself in the work that's about to be done, but we're going to have a torn up Las Vegas Strip in pieces over time for quite some time. So I think it's important for all of us, and I'm assuming that the other jurisdictions feel like I do, that their interests are a little bit different, right? I mean, this board and this commission has a task and a role, but we're all looking for ways that mass transit can impact our lives across the valley. And it seems important to me that everyone has an opportunity to do that. So I would think, as much work as it might be, that it would be a good thing to assign people and get them out to the other jurisdictions.
Noted. We could present this presentation as well, give a status update on our on-board study, which is broader and includes the entire valley.
Okay, thank you.
Well, with that, we will resume back to our posted agenda, and I will finish the general manager's report. One slide back. We are pleased to announce that the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA, awarded the RTC and the City of Las Vegas with a $300,000 grant to develop a transit-oriented development, or TOD as we call it, plan for Maryland Parkway. We are one of 20 recipients of this award, which supports comprehensive planning projects that improve access to public transportation. This grant will evaluate the potential for TOD, transportation-oriented development, opportunities along transit stops on Maryland Parkway from Sahara through downtown Las Vegas to the medical district. It'll help ensure that we have a strategic and collaborative plan in place so development occurs in a thoughtful manner that benefits everyone. The TOD plan will allow us to maximize the opportunities that high-capacity transit can potentially bring to Maryland Parkway, which is a vital corridor in our valley and is ripe for redevelopment and additional investment. So it was a very competitive grant program, and we're excited that the FTA recognized that Maryland Parkway was worthy of further study.
Thank you very much. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. We're happy. Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn it over to our director, John Penuelas, or JP, and he's going to update you on the status of our fuel revenue indexing program. We come back to you on a quarterly basis to report regularly the numbers associated with this program.
Thank you, Tina. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm very happy to be able to give you the first report of 2019. Happy New Year to everyone. As you'll recall, maybe next slide, please. Yes, if you'll recall, Assembly Bill 413, which passed in 2013, gave the RTC the ability to fund up to $700 million worth of projects. 225 projects were identified by the member agencies that were critical. Most of them were shovel-ready at the time. And the stats on that, we are very pleased to tell you that all 225 projects have been awarded. 171 of those are completed, and we have 54 that are currently under construction. So those projects came out ahead of schedule and under budget, which we have data to support that. That's 78 local small businesses have been put to work. 628 million have been awarded total. Approximately 8,100 jobs were created, and we are very pleased to tell you that all those projects will be completed by the end of this year. So, question 5, 2016, that extended the fuel revenue indexing for 10 years, and that gives us the ability, we feel, to fund up to $3 billion worth of projects over those 10 years and create up to 25,000 jobs. 250,000 would be nice, but we'll go with 25,000. And then finally, this is the progress to date. We have awarded 59 contracts. We have employed 16 local small businesses. We have awarded $141 million worth of projects, and we feel we've created over 1,200 jobs with that effort. So we're very pleased with that. And that concludes my piece of it. Tina?
Okay. Well, that concludes your general manager's report. Next on your agenda is to receive the Nevada Department of Transportation Director's Report from Director Rudy Malfavon.
Thank you, Tina. Happy New Year, everybody. I wanted to mention that we're going to be doing a groundbreaking event for the US 95 Northwest and the Clark County 215 Beltway Interchange. It's a project that we call the Centennial Interchange Phase 3C. That's going to be held the morning of January 22nd, so all of you are invited. This project will construct the northbound to westbound flyover ramp and the southbound to eastbound flyover ramp at that interchange, and then also the eastbound to southbound ramp. So a lot of more ramps to be built there. There's one more final phase in a couple years still to finish that interchange. Regarding the federal shutdown, luckily for NDOT, it doesn't affect highway funding, but it unfortunately does affect transit funding. NDOT has responsibility for rural transit. I know that it can affect the RTCs as they have transit operations responsibility, but for federal highways, those employees are working. For FTA, they're not working. So we've told some of our rural transit providers we'll cover those expenses. They don't have a lot of cash flow, but we feel it's important. It's a public safety issue, and it's the right thing to do. And although there's no end in sight to the shutdown, we're hopeful that it will end soon. It does could possibly delay federal approvals from resource agencies such as US EPA, Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM. Some of these agencies are involved in our projects with either environmental reviews or for BLM, it's getting material deposits, gravel pits, for instance. So there's some impacts that are still to be felt, but it's not affecting us right now and not delaying any projects. There's no transportation board meeting in January this year, as we have to brief our new constitutional officers that are members of the Transportation Board. Obviously, the chairman is Governor Sisolak, vice chair is Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall, and the new state controller will be briefed about the responsibilities and their roles as Transportation Board commissioners. So we will anticipate that we will have a February meeting, but it's not affecting any award of major projects. And with the new year, NDOT has taken over maintenance of a portion of the southern beltway, the 215 beltway from Pecos to Stephanie. There is a portion from Warm Springs to Pecos that's going to be transferred over for maintenance. It's just that there's a Clark County Public Works project that's ongoing or anticipated right in that section. So once that's completed, we'll take over that maintenance. Then we are working with a similar type of agreement to take over maintenance and ownership eventually of the Summerlin Parkway in its entirety from the city of Las Vegas. And we've committed to the city to maintain the landscaping in that section because the community is used to a certain level of maintenance and making it look very nice for the community. So we're working out those details with the city and the homeowners, the groups that participate in landscape maintenance. Last but not, I wanted to mention that I will be retiring soon as NDOT director. It's been a pleasure working as NDOT director for the last 6 years, 4 months, 2 days, something. But it's been a really fun ride. I've really enjoyed working with Tina and the RTC staff, and really enjoyed the input from this board. It was important to receive that information and direction monthly from Chairman Brown and others on this board, from the commissioners. It helps NDOT to focus on what's important in Southern Nevada, and many projects to come that are included in our STIP that we're committed to, our statewide transportation improvement program. And I wanted to ensure that NDOT is committed to delivering the projects on the Fuel Revenue Indexing 2, FRI 2 list that was agreed to last fall. So we have a lot to do here in Southern Nevada, and NDOT and the state of Nevada are still committed to delivering those projects and working collaboratively in partnership with RTC. So thank you for all the support that I've received over the years.
Well, thank you, Rudy. Certainly the appreciation and the sense of camaraderie that we've had with you has been mutual. I think that our agencies have done a lot together over the last 6 years. So thank you for always being a partner with us.
Thank you, Rudy. We worked together on a couple of items, and before you were the director, we worked on items together. So we appreciate your service and the good work you've done, and wish you the best in the next things that you endeavor to do.
Yeah, I have a feeling you'll be around. Yeah.
I'd like to also thank the NDOT staff down here in Southern Nevada. Tracy's done an awesome job as my deputy director down here. Tony Ilya and the public outreach team down here have done a great job, especially on Project Neon and other major projects. So Mary Martini, our district engineer, takes care of the maintenance and construction operations. So they've done an awesome job. They've made me look good. So thanks to the staff too.
Thanks.
Madam General Manager,
Yeah.
if you give me a second. By the way, it's really good to see you today. I just wanted to say just how instrumental NDOT has been to the resurgence and the future of North Vegas, especially in Ward 1, with all your support. And I appreciate, I know in talks with Dale, our director, I know they appreciate very much being able to work with your staff. And I just hope whoever comes in after you has half your class and talent.
Oh.
Okay, next.
Next on your agenda is to receive a presentation on the progress of Year 1 goals for the Traffic Signal Mobility Visioning Project, and I'd like to introduce Teresa Gassier from our team, who will introduce the item.
Good morning, and thank you, commissioners, and to the public. This morning, we are here to give an update, as we have given some previous updates about the Traffic Signal Mobility Visioning Roadmap. And the roadmap provides a framework for strategies and emerging technology opportunities. So what we have been doing is we've been deploying different technology strategies, and there are several always going to say this wrong, data-driven decision-making that is currently underway. So with all of this data that we are collecting through these various deployments, we have decided to move forward and retain the services of Icebox Consulting. And with us today is Yin Nowade from Icebox Consulting to talk about the Know Your Data project.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you again for having me. I'm Yin Nowade. I am the CEO and founder of Icebox. Today's presentation is going to be a very high-level overview of what we're doing with the data effort. It's broken up into 3 sections. Section number 1 is what the data pilot is all about. Section number 2 is what is big data and why do we care? And section number 3 is future opportunities, and we're going to do that all in the next 5 to 7 minutes. So very high level. Great, so the first part is the data pilot overview. So as Teresa mentioned, data is an important part of the RTC mobility roadmap. And this effort of the pilot is a 3-month pilot, and it's an important first step in building those foundational building blocks. Specifically, we're looking to, this is not just an academic exercise, we are looking to have specific outcomes that are going to help make sure that you're progressing with that piece of your strategy. Firstly, it's all about know your data. That is a term that was coined within the RTC, and it is basic journalism 101. So it's who, what, when, where, why. What is happening with the data? Where does it sit? Where does it go? Who uses it? And why do they use it? So that is an initial first blueprint. Secondly, and this is a word that we're going to use quite a bit in the next 5 minutes, it's called insights. So that's the piece that Teresa was talking about as it relates to data-driven insights. What does the data say? How do we interpret it, and then how do we take action from it? Lastly, and this is an important part of any data project, regardless of how short or long, and that is about governance. The governance is, if you think about all of the activity that's happening with the data project, the governance is a fencing around that. So I promised you we would talk a little bit about big data. It is a buzzword these days. Everybody's talking about big data. It's a specific term. And one of the first things that we did when we started this project about 4 weeks ago was looking at the status and current assessment of what's happening with the data within the FAST division of RTC. Big data is 3 characteristics. It's 3 V's. It's volume, velocity, and variety. Volume is big data has to have at least, in terms of volume, a minimum threshold of 1 terabyte. I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything to anyone in the room. It's quite a bit of data. It's about 1,000 gigabytes. So as it relates to terabytes, within the FAST division of RTC, the division alone already has 5 times that. So what that means is the organization is already coping with big data. There's a high volume of it. Secondly, velocity. You're getting data real time. So there's data coming in from sensors, there's data coming in from signals, et cetera. It's all coming in real time. It is not slow, it's very, very fast. And lastly, variety. There's quite a bit of variety of data that's coming in. So bottom line is the RTC currently has big data. So it sort of qualifies as it relates to how important this project is. So why is it important? I've already kind of hit on some of the high-level reasons why this is important. First and foremost, and I'm going to jump around this page, the most important aspect of data is what you can do with it. What does it say, and what action could be taken that would improve the lives of constituents and, quite frankly, help improve the travel experience. So the driver experience. There's always an end point to the data. The data is a means to get to, obviously, a specific outcome. So insights. Additionally, there's also a lot of risk associated with data. So as we've discussed already, really quickly, there is a tremendous amount of data coming in to the RTC, and specifically within the FAST division. What do you do to govern that? That would mitigate and minimize the risk associated with big data. So that's what the risk management piece addresses. And lastly, I did want to mention, as it relates to the amount and the volume of data, so currently, there is enough data there to qualify for a big data project. But what will be coming is sort of possibly a more interesting aspect to big data, because the technologies that have already been deployed by the organization and the agency are going to mean that in the next 12 to 18 months, there's going to be far more data coming in, probably exponentially. So in thinking about, okay, what does matter is insights. How do we even begin to understand the data? There are basically 3 steps to getting at those insights. Item number 1 is just understanding what you've already collected. What does the data already say? Item number 2 is, this is kind of the exciting stuff, is predictive. What do we think the data will show? How do we predict the outcomes? And lastly, it's prescriptive. What do you do to actually prescribe and take action? So these pieces, getting insights and being data-driven, the next level of understanding that is really understanding that you're looking at the past, you're making predictions about the future, and then you're taking action based on that, and it's a closed feedback loop. So the future, I think I've done a pretty good job of moving us through this presentation. I hope we've left some time for questions. So as it relates to the future, data is, again, just a means to an end. So data and data insights will help drive the outcomes within the areas that you've already invested in. So think about data as the linchpin. There is data that's being generated by each of these efforts. There's the IoT effort, which is the Internet of Things. That's all the devices speaking to each other. There's a smart cities effort. Of course, there's overall technology strategy and planning. And of course, everybody's favorite topic is AI, machine learning. What will the machines do in the future? All of this is in our near future, and data is the piece that will help drive those outcomes and also help you understand whether or not they work. And that actually is the nutshell of what we're doing. Any questions?
So do members, the remaining members,
You
have
don't
any
want you to take it
questions?
personal.
I won't take it personally.
Any questions?
I do have a
comments?
question. It just seems to be a struggle for public agencies to hire the data administrators, and a lot of times they have to go outsource that. Have you have any comments about how some agencies are addressing that issue?
Commissioner, you bring up a very good point. I don't have specifics that I can speak to as it relates to the public sector. I can tell you that the overall, the piece on risk management kind of addresses that. If you look back, there is a part that is called talent risk. And talent risk is referencing the fact that there is a massive talent shortage, both in the private and public sector. And as more compliance comes down the pike, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of competition for that talent, and it currently does not exist. There's not enough in the pipeline.
Yeah, and like local governments cannot afford it. So we'll be working with a lot of consultants and experts. And hopefully we as public agencies will start to probably collaborate in sharing some of these resources, these human resources and this talent, so that way we're not keeping it just siloed within our own organizations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Yen. So she said it much more eloquently than me, and I'll just explain it in my layman's terms. At FAST, at our traffic management center, we have the ability to collect so much data. We're actually very leading edge in the way in our technologies and some of the programs that we have. But historically, just like all other agencies, we've never really focused on how we get that data to coalesce and share platforms and be interoperable to actually start using it for more predictive and efficient, learning to operate our infrastructure more efficiently. So this is the first step towards finding out all this different data sources that we've got. What are we collecting? And then how do we move it forward so that we're using it aggressively and progressively for managing our infrastructure. So she said it way smarter than me, but that's... let's see. So we can skip item number 46. We do not need to have a closed door session with council, but we will move on to item number 47, which is your final citizens participation period.
Thank you. So this is the second and final time to offer public comment. Anyone wishing to do so, please approach the podium, and you have 3 minutes to complete your presentation. I have 3 cards. It looks like Alida Dupree, followed by, I think it's Havander Davis, and then Stephanie Versnick. The floor is yours.
Commissioner Gibson, thank you. Alida Dupree for the record. Speaking again on miscellaneous RTC stuff. So a lot of good things. I hope we can see rail here. I personally would prefer New York City style subway, but that might be too rich for most people's blood. But I think that a lot of the casinos, they have these big basements, and I can imagine subway passengers coming up into the casino from the trains. Throw some high-speed rail in there would be really nice. So I'm not riding the bus a whole lot. I've been walking 6 miles a day, but I still ride it enough where I can buy passes on the app. But as my walking increases, I may be going to single fares, which means that I'll be doing single rides using the $1.50 2-hour pass, so I can buy that on the app, because I'm not going to go out and withdraw dollar bills. And I may be overpaying for that, but I need the convenience. But I think it's important to look at fare policy in dealing with the Strip. Maybe we shouldn't be looking so much at the Strip versus general market, because I ride the Strip, but yet I'm buying general market passes because I buy them for 15 or 30 days at a time. So I'm not really showing up in the mix at all. I think there should be uniform policy, and our minimum fare, I think, should go away from a single ticket, but to have our minimum fare be a timed pass, such as the 2 hours that we have. You see that in San Francisco and LA, and now Denver has a 3-hour minimum, and you can buy all the fares in Denver on the app. So we can hopefully eliminate a lot of the cash payment and continue the push to move away from the paper tickets. So since I last saw you, I got this neat little thing called a contactless debit card. There are actually millions of them out there, but most people don't know what the little sideways Wi-Fi symbol is. It's very fast. That might be our future of fare payment, along with the app, as we can move away from paper tickets. So I use this. Maybe I'll have to show y'all as in action someday. And I think it's important we continue to work on the ride share for disabled passengers. You are serving me. The Veterans Transport Network took me on a very good ride, but I rode in the big bus all by myself. The driver was very nice, it was very safe, but it probably cost you about $40, and I punched in a Lyft calculation from here to that same location, and they can do it for about $20. So these are things to think about as I get on my way and get ready to ride on another bus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I think so. Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. Happy New Year. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Evander Davis, and I've been coming here for about a year, and I still would like for you guys to work on extending the service area for persons with disabilities. There's still a lot of us who aren't able to get around because we may live outside of the service area, and it would be nice for us to be able to go where we would like to go. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Versnick, and I'm speaking in front of you for the 14th time. I'm very disappointed to see that I've only got 3 members to speak to. Public comment that I've seen, it doesn't seem to be important enough to have our members stay until the end of the meeting. However, and I've got new members, so nobody is really familiar with my story. So short story is, I'm half a mile outside the service area. My son works at the Nellis Air Force Base commissary, and he's been there for over 15 years. He's a federal employee. I have to take him to work, and RTC will bring him to the library, but will not bring him to my home because I am a half a mile outside the service area. I'm asking RTC to expand that service area to the way it was in 2011, which was 1.5 miles. What the ADA requires is 3/4 of a mile, but in 2011, we were going at 1.5 miles outside the service area. So last month, I stated that in my opinion, I felt the peer review study that was conducted by Dr. Montero did not address the unique growing needs of this community. For the last 2 months, and I know I'm speaking to new members, so you guys weren't here, but for the last 2 months, I've asked this commission for their feedback and their viewpoint on the review, on the peer review study. I still haven't received an answer. Have you even read the study? Have you even listened to my testimony? Do you even care? Recently, I spoke to a grandma who is raising her grandson with autism. He's 21 years old. She lives in the 89131 zip code in the Northwest. She has lived there for 11 years, and she's not in the service area. She transports her grandson everywhere, and she is in her 70s. Soon, she won't be able to do that anymore. Then what will happen? Do you even care? Last week, I heard on the news that Las Vegas is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. It also reported that Las Vegas is one of the top cities for seniors to retire. Our growth will only continue to grow. How many people will buy homes and not have transportation? I find it ironic that almost every casino has a paratransit stop. So if you live in the service area, you can go to any casino in the city. However, you can't pick up your mail at certain post offices or go to a cemetery to visit your loved ones. There's something morally wrong with that. Do you even care? This commission needs to understand that they are not meeting the needs of this community. Members of our community who are tax-paying citizens and registered voters, just like my son, has no transportation. If I'm not here to drive him to work, he would lose his job, a federal job that he's held for over 15 years. His benefits and retirements would go away. That's not fair. He doesn't deserve that. Do you even care?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have like 2 more sentences. Can I finish?
Read them quickly.
In closing, the Americans with Disabilities Act was designed to protect the rights of people with disabilities, give them access to transportation. Again, I'm asking this commission to restore the service area to the way it was back in 2011, 8 years ago.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address us in the public comment period? There being no one, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.